Hello and welcome to another Black Crow video. This one is all about world eaters and like getting the most out of your charge. Um, my name's Sam. I am Black Crow Gaming's like melee expert. I play world eaters. I play Emperor's Children. At the moment, I'm going crazy on world eaters, and I'm here to talk about pylon moves and charges and how to set yourself up for the best possible, um, like you know, to express the most skill into like the gameplay. Like the all of my videos on on the new World Eaters Codex so far have been very much on the like macro side of things, all about like lists and detachments and strategies, like overarching strategies. This is going to be a lot more like nitty gritty detail. I've come up with a few scenarios. It's not exhaustive. I'm not going to be able to, I can't, nobody wants to sit here and listen to me talk for hours about every possible situation. But I feel like the ones that I've brought, I'm going to bring up will be, you'll be able to, like, if you understand those fundamentals, you can build on it and you'll be able to hopefully spot the situations where it is best for you to use, to make advantage of movement. Because obviously it's all about rolling dice and you doing a lot of damage, but you know the games are won and lost in the movement phase, charge phase, all of these different like nuances of like, all right, if my model was like an inch this way, I would have been able to do this thing. So let's talk about it. I'm going to dive into, first we're going to talk about like the pylon. So what it is, have a 6-inch pylon now. A 6-inch pylon consolidate across the army wide with one of the blessings. This is incredibly powerful tool, but if you aren't planning for it, you won't get to use it most of the time. If you just shove all your models into combat, then you're not going to get to use it much. And also, the reason why I put the rule on the screen, so this is the first part of the rule, got a second slide, but the second part is I find a lot of people um, make mistakes. So you watch a stream, you see it. I've had opponents try and do things that don't quite work. In older editions, Pylon's changed over editions. So in older editions, the rules were slightly different, and that can confuse things. But in this edition, this is the rule. So the main mistake I see is people will, if they think especially with 6-inch pylon, they will like go and like move past models to get into combat with models that are further down the line and things like this. And that doesn't really work the way that a lot of people want it to. Because the main thing, so in this rule here, I'm not going to read it out, it's on the screen. Feel free to pause it and read it. But effectively, uh, you need to be able to, this is just the conditions of like being able to make the pylon. So the nuance is in this part of the rule, which is when each model makes the move. So each model must end that move closer to the closest enemy model, not unit, model. um and if that could also end in base to base, it has to end in base to base. Now it doesn't have to end in base to base to that closest model, so you can do a thing where you like move slightly if you're with a 6-inch pylon, for example, if you're 4 inches away from or 3 inches away from a model, and then you could pylon past it and go into base to base with a model further along the line, you still need to end closer than that, like 3 or 4 inches that you started with that first model. So you can't just go, okay, yeah, I'm ending in base to base with that unit. I'm just going to be over and attack this guy though. So like if you have a guy, I'll show some examples in a minute, but like that's the key part. Is it's all about, so when you're doing your charge move, when you're not being forced into that base to base, you really want to be thinking about where you're placing your models to then think about where you want them to pile into. Because if you don't get that right, I'm sorry, I'm still having camera issues, and apparently it's that quick that the camera failed. Um, so yeah, basically there's a lot of like power in that extra movement, especially when we're talking about 6 inches. Like 3 inches is nice and it has some like nuanced things. I've talked about it in an older video pre-codex. I mean that video's probably yeah, like 9 months old now, but that's still all applicable, right? The rules haven't changed. So using it to get around like transports where you kill the unit and then pile into the enemy, try and get around fights first. I think when I made the video, either heroic had just gone to 1 CP or was just about to go to 1 CP, so it was less about heroic. We're going to talk about heroic intervention in here because with 6-inch piling, you can get around heroic, and you can potentially have berserker models go 40 inches in a turn. So, I'm going to crack onto some examples now. So, yeah, let's start. But before I do that, sponsors: Drainforge, Glasshammer, Trident. Links are in the description. If you want terrain, you want models, you want tournaments, you want um, uh, cases, carrying cases, good magnetized cases, like Trident's fantastic for that. All of them have a 5% discount code. Please go use them. Please support our sponsors. They are fantastic. Right. That's housekeeping out of the way. Let's go into some examples. So it's going to look very simple. I'm just going to have bases, and this is quite reasonably standard thing, right? You've got an enemy screen in front of you. You've got your unit that's going to charge. Obviously, we're world eaters. We're red, and if that's not red, I'm colorblind. Don't at me in the comments. He so yeah, so it's simple. You roll your charge distance. They're all about the same distance away from the enemy. You end up like this. And suddenly none of your models can do any form of piling whatsoever. And you're like, oh, okay. Because if any of those weren't in base to base, because they didn't have to be, they could have potentially moved like further around. Like there's a gap here, and they can come around here, and then suddenly they get potentially more distance. So we've got to think about it more. If we don't really want to be in this situation, if we can avoid it, unless all we want to do is hit that squad and not go further forward, potentially we might want to come further backwards, which is now has reminded me of an example that I've forgotten to put in here. But yes, so the this is like really not an optimal sort of position that we want to be in. Instead, because we always have the charge is successful based on that first model reaching. So you only need to move the closest model as close as possible, unless you're worried about it dying to like an Overwatch or something like that, because it's not your special weapon, which is why you want to probably put your special weapons first, unless you're using them. So many nuanced things in here, because maybe you don't want the special weapons at the first because you want to like whip the special weapons into something else. But so you need to be planning all of this in the start of like in the movement phase, and also be planning whether you even want to take the 6-inch consolidate blessing, because you won't always want to use it, you won't always want to have it, so you want to be making these decisions about what you're doing in your turn very, very early. You don't just run at the enemy and then go, okay, actually I'm going to charge here and here and here, and you need to be setting these combos up when you're choosing your blessings, which obviously is difficult if your opponent is going first, but that's a different problem. So instead of going and lining straight up against the enemy, you could do it a bit more like this. So I've flipped it to make it a little bit easier for space. But effectively, having the closest model at the front, and then that means your charge distance is the same, right? So it doesn't matter what your charge is. And if you roll like a 12 on the charge, let's say this is like 6 inches here. If you rolled a 12 on the charge, all of these models are going to have to base anyway. So there is always a sense that the dice could, dice you out of it. But let's say you could get quite close to avoid the potential of like failing charges and stuff like that. You can still stretch your models backwards so that if you don't roll crazy high, you have lots of space. And especially when you have a 6-inch pile-in, you're very forgiven on stretching yourself backwards and then rolling a low charge, as long as you still get in the charge, obviously. So you want that first guy to be as close as possible, and then you want to stretch the rest back. And you don't need to stretch them like in a line, because you're in a situation where you want all of these guys to attack. So if you roll that like minimum number, you want still to be able to get all of these guys in. So yeah, you go to from there, and then you roll. Let's say that was 6 inches. You get like a 7 charge, and you can sort of end up in a situation like this, right? So every model's gotten closer, and everything's like that. And then because of that, you can loop. So uh, you know, if we're looking at this, it's like this model's coming around here, and it's like, well, it ended closer to it ended in base, and it ended closer to this model. Same for this one. This could actually, like, if you potentially blocked this up like this, there's a situation where like this one, oh, we can't get into base anywhere, so he can just come like over this way, as long as like that distance isn't greater than the original distance. Which is why, like, when you're doing the charge move, you don't necessarily want to move just everything as close as possible if it doesn't have to base. Obviously, remember that restriction. You have to base if you can base, but you could even block yourself in ways. But yeah, so then you end up with like a situation where you can wrap like around the unit, and that way you can get further distance past the unit, right? So because maybe this isn't intended where like this unit here is supposed to like kill this 5 white models. Maybe you've got another unit that's going to charge in, and then this way you've gotten more distance, that then suddenly these two units were probably like 8 inches apart, and now you're piling into them from with 3 guys, and you're going to get to hit them. So you could have potentially traveled quite a bit of distance to get into this unit back here, because your first, like, I put slightly bigger models, so like 8 bound, kill the first 5, and then you get the 6-inch pile in. As long as you're less than 7 inches, you can get in, and that like just makes screening really, really difficult for opponents. Obviously, if there was if the screen extended and you had more of a wall, then there is a potential that they can screen you out here. But if you just need to tag this unit, then there's potential where you could like, okay, wrap round screens. If you like, it'd be a bit more easier to show on a different diagram. But yeah, so this is basic, simple stuff of like, just think about your positioning when you're moving to that charging position. Don't just put every model as close as possible to the enemy model, because you don't need that, especially when you've got that 6-inch pile and consolidate. You do not need to have like every model at that front. It's just better to string yourself out and stretch. So another example, and this is like a similar one, where it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to try and kill 2 units. I'm use 2 units to kill 1 unit, and then get positioning on something else. So um, this blob up here is an objective. Um, so I want to put a bunch of OC on that objective to maybe steal it away from my opponent, stop an action, stop a whatever, right? So I just want to get a load of OC on there. I've moved. This is the furthest I can move. It's like, okay, there's probably, even if there is a unit on that objective, it's probably a bit too far to charge. Okay, well, let me just slingshot off this unit. So you charge with the first unit first, and you use up as much of the space as possible. So this is a situation where I was just saying how you don't line yourself up as much as possible, but sometimes you want to, because you want to block other units. You have to make base if you can. So you want to force like the space, force the other unit to not be able to base uh, as much as can. So you charge in like that, and then suddenly you've got only one contact point for the second unit, and you can end up charging like this, and then what you see here is all of the models are actually like closer. Like this one on the outside has ended up closer to the unit. It hasn't gone directly towards them though. It's gone directly towards the objective, because that's where we're trying to go, right? So then unit 1 will kill this unit, or it might not. Let's say it leaves a couple of models alive, but it either leaves this one so you can't just pile in across this way, or it leaves this one, and um, so there's a few different situations where if they leave someone alive, it can be annoying, but it doesn't stop this. If you've set yourself up quite well, it doesn't stop you from getting onto this objective. Because even if I activated with this unit 2 first, this guy can't get into base to base, so he could finish over here which obviously he's behind the thing, but you get the idea, right? Like he couldn't base, so he just has to end closer, and you can see how that's closer than it was before. Um, and so you can end up with this situation where, and then maybe you put like a this guy will come around here, and then this one sort of goes here and makes coherency, and then you kill the guy, and then they all run back the other way. So onto what's the objective. So even if you fail to kill him in this situation, you still have one guy on the objective, and maybe that's all you need because you've got secure no man's land or whatever, right? There's loads of situations where this will be useful. The rest of this original thing was obviously you kill the unit, and then that unit just gets to consolidate onto the objective. So this also, I'm going to talk about it here because I know I haven't later. Um, there's a scenario here where you have a piece of terrain that you're hidden behind, let's say, on an objective. Like it's your safe objective. Your opponents ran forward, maybe put a screen out in front of you. With 6-inch pile and consolidate, you can kind of safely go out, charge something, string yourself back, and then consolidate back onto objective. So like even from weird situations where yeah, like you can camera you might actually be strung through, like the train could be quite a bit in front of uh, the objective. You want to stay behind that train. If you string your models back so that one of them can reach that objective back there, as long as the rest of them are still closer to that objective when they than any other objective, they will be able to move back towards it. So yeah, it's there's some maybe I'll add that one in for another part of the video when I come up with some more shenanigans with this. But this is sort of like the fundamentals of it, and I think one of the things that people like are used to doing all of these things, but when it comes to the 6-inch, we just have this like so I really like, if you've talked to me on Discord or other things, I'm really liking the 20-man berserker unit, and it's because of this 6-inch pylon and also the 3-inch with the 10-inch move. The jug lord giving them the 3-inch engagement range allows you to do some silly stuff with positioning with movement. So I've sort of marked up a rough thing. So obviously we've gone a little bit smaller scale because we're talking about much bigger distance. So let's say I have a bunch of I have a bunch of 20 berserkers behind some terrain, and my opponent is maybe that's his home objective, and this is like a side objective. Obviously, I've not mapped out things. I have done this in a game, by the way. What I'm about to show you, it was a bit more. There was a lot more going on, so I've simplified it. But the end result was effectively the same. Um, so yeah, it involved some more units in the middle. But basically, you can string 20 berserkers. You can get so much movement with them. So in the berserker warband, you get the advance and charge. So you've got 10-inch move, then you've got advance and charge. Then then you do your charge roll. That's 2d6 more. So you've got 10 plus 3d6, and then you've got a pylon of 6 and then a consolidate of 6. Now, pylon 6 and consolidate 6, most of the time you're not going to get to use all that 6 inches that things, but you could, with such a long unit, charge something that's reasonably close to one end of the unit, and then have the other end of the unit sort of, like literally wrap around, and just gain so much movement because just if as long as your unit is allowed to make a pylon move, every model in the unit can make that move as if it's not in base to base. So if your model is like out in the open, like 12 inches away from anything, it can pile in 6 towards whatever is closest. And it's like, all right, great. So it's going to get to pile in 6 where it wants to. And then that's a 6-inch more movement. Maybe that gets it to an objective, maybe it doesn't. And then at the end, it gets to consolidate, assuming that somewhere in the unit you can end on an objective or in combat with something else. So it's like, oh, okay. If you can do that, then you just go even further. So yeah, let's so the way I've literally done this is I'm bunched up behind some terrain, maybe a little bit more spread out than this, but bunched up behind some terrain, and then I advanced out. I believe the one situation where I've done it, it was I got a 5, which gives me 15 inches of movement, not to scale, guys. But so the unit comes out and you just immediately spread it, right? You do not want this unit. Like the only time you want to use the unit in like a death ball is if you're like running into a warden brick or a deathwing knight brick or something. You just something you just want to obliterate through and not spread out. This particular the game that I did it in was against sisters, so there was nothing in his army because he had the Morgan Vol unit, but that was being killed by Khan elsewhere on the board, and well, not Khan, but other stuff, and Khan was nearby. Um, so this was a way of me just sweeping into the rest of his army, and it's just like, well, I'm not scared of any one of your units. I just want to tag as much as possible. I want to hurt as much as possible. So let me just yeet my bodies into it. So I moved out, and then you see here, like I'm miles away from this objective, like absolutely miles. Like let's say this is his home objective. I've come from my deployment zone pretty much, like maybe slightly in front of my deployment zone. So it's a long way to go. And then I roll a charge, and in this particular example, I rolled a 6 on the charge, which was enough to get me in, but only just. So the charge I got then move this. I mean, like I say, not to scale. It's just an example. Maybe the charge roll in this particular example is higher than a 6 because obviously it looks if that first move was a 15 or whatever, yeah. But we d- we do a charge move, and then I've only declared on that one unit down in the corner because there's no reason to declare on anybody else. There might be reasons why you would, but in this particular situation, uh, there was no reason to declare on the other unit because it was miles away. I might not even been able to declare on it because I could have been, 13, 14 inches away and then rolled like a 8 on the charge, and suddenly I can still hit that unit. So yeah, you're strung out, and you when you do the charge move. Now, every single one of these models had to have ended closer to this unit that I charged against. So maybe that's why you multi-charge if there is a unit up here that you want to hit, and you don't mind hitting it in that initial charge. But every model has to end closer. And then you activate the unit pile in. So like they can't interrupt with this unit. They can't heroic with this unit unless you go within 6 inches of them. Um, and then you just get to do your 6 inch pile in, which obviously then will look like this. And suddenly you're hitting in two complete different spaces, like on two objectives, and the end result, looks like something like this. And maybe you've piled into more units or something like that in the middle or wherever, and you now have a stupid threat range of if you shoot me, I'm going to blood surge. So the main part that I want to look at is here. So if you have an enemy unit that, let's say, right, let's look at the Plague Marine brick that scared the living crap out of at least me for the whole of 10th so far, and it still exists in the index. A fight first brick that hits incredibly hard. Does lots of damage too, and lethal sustain, all that nastiness. Now, obviously, we can just run headlong into it and do -1 damage, and we lose some guys and we kill them. Or we can do fight on death and probably still struggle to kill them because 4+s are so swingy. Or we can charge something on like 20 inches away and sit with a bunch of our squad 6.1 inches away and go, you can't heroic. There is nothing you can do about this. And then I'm going to get to pile in and smack the living crap out of it. And that is honestly that there's lots that your opponent can do to try and stop that. There's lots of stuff you can do to try and stop them stopping you. There's lots of nuances like, oh, what if they have a screen in the way? Well, you can still charge the screen with something, and yeah, maybe they're heroic then, but then you're not. Then they've had to come in front of that screen, so then you can pile into them and kill them. So like say you spawn run into the screen or something like that, or you shoot the screen with Forge Fiends, or there's so many different like, oh, what if they do this, and what if I do that, and whatever. Fundamentally, this is a possibility. And it's a way of getting around scary interrupts, scary things is just like, oh, let me just charge a rhino over there and sit my unit, because these models can't get into base to base with that unit that I've charged. I will just sit them 6.1 inches away from you, as many of them as possible. And then as long as one of them gets into engagement range, the rest of them all have a 3-inch engagement range, threat range. So it's like you can get quite a lot to hit, and you can, have all the special weapons over in that section, and the non-special weapons are hitting the weird thing that you've attacked that's reasonably far away. And I think that is one of the main bonuses, positives that you can pull out with this. I mean, you can do it with 10-man squad as well. Like fundamentally, it still works. It's just a bit harder to set up the positioning. And because you need to be able to charge a unit and sit far enough away from the unit you want to kill. If it is a scary fight first unit, or you're doing loads. This is the thing. It's like it's not just fight first units. If they've got a good combat unit, or let's say they've got two good combat units, you can charge into one with your stuff that you're going to activate first, and then do this trick where you're going to hit the second one, and that could even be into that same unit technically. It all depends on positioning. It does depend on your opponent's positioning a lot, on whether they've gotten stuff that's in the way or whatever, and what you have to remove that stuff. So I think early game skirmishing is obviously very important in that, but there's so many weird and wonderful aspects of you can uh set yourself up and plan it, because oh, I just need to end on that objective. I don't care, the unit there isn't going to hit me very hard. I just want to consolidate into it. Okay, well, where do I need my model to end the charge move, be able to pile in 6 and then consolidate 6 into that unit? Okay, well, it just needs to go here. Usually it's not that difficult to find that spot. Now sometimes it's impossible, right? You've got to make sure that what you're trying to do is possible, but sometimes, 6 inches opens up so much. Like I said earlier on in the video, 40 inches is the max, right? So if you had 6 on the advance, so this model here comes from here, 6 on the advance gets out to let's say here, then goes then if you happen to roll double 6 on a charge, I mean, it's just the max threat you could get. But then you could yeet yourself up here or something or whatever, if you're stretched, and then it's all right, let me just pile in 6 over here because it's still getting closer, and I wasn't able to get to base, and then it's all right, let me consolidate 6, and it's this individual model could possibly move 40 inches in one turn, and that could have been 34 and then punch something. And that thing that it punched could have been, from that individual model, could have been 37 inches away, which is just insane, or slightly less than 37. So who needs advanced and charge? Obviously I'm talking about using advanced and charge in this thing, but you don't need it army wide, and this unit would still work without that advanced and charge. Part of the reason why I like the Juglord is that extra 2 inches and that on that engagement range and on the move. It makes life very much easier, and you don't really need more punch for someone like Khan. Khan's good in a 10-man squad going off somewhere. But yeah, I think, depending on terrain, because it's all about having this unit be safe until it does this move. So you kind of probably want to do this move turn 2, right? Turn 1, you sort of stage into as far forward as possible, but it doesn't need to be far forward because your opponent's going to have to come onto objectives somewhere, and that lets you just slingshot. If we're talking about slingshot, there's no slingshot bigger than this. It's just, I don't think there is one in the game that could do, another unit in the game that could do this. Because yeah, you can have a 20-man boy unit, but that's not going to have 6-inch pile and consolidate. So and also they're still berserkers when they get in with strength 6, AP 1, and you could give the whole unit an extra AP. So, and there's a bunch of special weapons. You can kill a lot of stuff with it. So you could end up hitting 2 or 3 units, wiping each of them, and then piling into the next line. God forbid you run into Eldar and there's you have an 8-bound unit somewhere near, you could wipe an entire Eldar army in one activation. I mean, that requires your opponent to position an idiot, but the maths is possible. So yeah, the main takeaway from this, and I hope that it's been informative because I'm getting to the end of my examples that I put together, um, is it's all about the movement. It's all about the forethought of where do I need my model to be to get where it wants to get to legally. Make sure that you're before you're piling in models, you measure how far they are to the closest model. I know this is going to be slightly more time consuming, especially for slower players. But we don't have to roll Fiona panes anymore, so that should save us some time. But yeah, you gotta. It will be finicky at times. Sometimes, if you and your opponent aren't sure which way it should go, maybe there's two models that look very similar in distance, and it's very important to affect which way the model your model can go. Just get a judge in an event. Like judges won't mind doing calls for you. Like it's the most impartial way of doing it, and that's what they're there for. So yeah, definitely. I think test out some of this stuff. I've skipped over some of the simple ones that I've covered in the past. Charging multiple units into transports, or going directly through screens. It's just all about just getting those extra inches from um, you know from the charge and things like that. Like not having to base. You don't want to base until the last moment. And even then, if you don't have to, it's probably you probably could get in a better position without basing, assuming you can still hit. So yeah, on that note, I will be ending there. Please, like, subscribe to the video if you've made it this far. Go check out some of the other ones if you've not seen them. I will be continuing to create lots of World Eater content. I'll be going to some events soon with the army. So please let me know what you want to see from me, or any questions you have about this. Like, is there any situations you're unsure of, or how it would work? Put them in the comments. And on that note, I will end. Thanks for watching.